Before we begin this first episode, I'm going to ask you a few questions, something to think about. Do any of these statements sound familiar to you? Do you worry too much? Do you drag yourself out of bed every single morning and often wake up feeling sad for no obvious reason? You're disposed to making negative predictions? Do you worry about the worst that could happen in any situation? Do you take negative feedback personally? Are you your biggest critic? Do you avoid people more than you should? Does anything less than perfection feel like failure to you? If any of these statements hold true to you, then there's a chance that you're experiencing some degree of anxiety and or depression. Unpleasant feelings are part of our daily lives. They just happen. They're there to teach us a lesson. Once we've learned our lesson, they often move on, but they might come back with another lesson later on. As a result of these experiences, you're most likely to feel sad or maybe stressed. These are perfectly normal emotions to go through from time to time. Everyone feels low and apprehensive about things at some point in their lives. But when these unpleasant emotions begin to consume you, then it's time for you to act on it before it's too late. And fortunately for the whole planet, these feelings can be healed. They can be made to shift to a more positive and constructive space. And I'm here to help. This anti anxiety podcast has been written with this especially in mind. You're going to find a wide range of skills and tools to help you manage and overcome anxiety. This podcast is filled with questions that can help you reflect and find answers for yourself. I urge you to give every practice in each chapter of this podcast a try before deciding on the ones that will work best for you. On that note, I welcome you to my podcast titled The Anti-Anxiety Formula. I've had an enriching time creating this, and I hope that this experience translates to you, our listeners, as well. Overcome your stuck points. Anxiety can creep up on you in many ways, from physical and behavioral symptoms that are obvious to subtler symptoms that mess with your emotional and cognitive state of being. Yet, each time it can leave behind a somewhat similar and familiar feeling, the feeling of being a little more lost, battered, and alone. No anxious person has the same set of symptoms, which is why each person's anxiety is unique and therefore their individual journey. That said, most people have some of each type of the symptoms, only in different combinations, which makes understanding how it works more appreciable. This chapter focuses on personality concepts that will help you understand how your anxiety works. The multifaceted you. Now, you cannot understand the average anxious person to understand your anxiety. You don't need to either. You need to understand the many dimensions within which you and your anxiety exist. Once you begin to identify these dimensions, which are mostly characterized by triggers and then symptoms, you'll be able to work around them. And in time, you will overcome them as well. All right, what do you see? Do any of these situations sound familiar to you? Do you dislike change? And every time you're put into a new situation, you start to feel restless and worried? Do you overprocess information, decisions, possibilities before you can act on them? Do you tend to be pessimistic about the present and the future? Are you constantly dwelling on negative past experiences? Do you worry about everything? Do you often feel awkward when someone compliments you? Do you believe that they just don't mean their what compliments they're saying, or that they might be mocking you in some way? Are you your harshest critic? While there's no scoring system here to rate your anxiety, it does help you to understand if you are anxiety prone or not. The more items you check off, the more likely that you are suffering from anxiety, depression, maybe even both. Understanding your anxiety and what it is doing to you. Anxiety on the inside can affect what you do and how you act on the outside. So, if you were to observe your mind and body carefully, you might be able to notice some signs, behavioral and physical, that can tell you what your anxiety might be doing to you. For instance, an anxious person might be dealing with several conflicting and apprehensive thoughts. The internal noise and fear that reverberates inside might make them appear tired, withdrawn, or even nervous. So, what does your behavior say about you? Get a piece of paper and a pen and write these down. I find myself crying for no reason. There are times when I feel empty and I can't make myself do what I want to do. I often avoid socializing. I avoid risks. I also avoid doing fun things because I worry about the possible risk involved. I'm afraid of failure and judgment. I get fidgety. I obsess over the past, worry about the future, and can rarely stay in the present. Now, what about your body? Does this sound familiar? I have no appetite. Or maybe I'm always hungry. My palms are always sweating. I feel nauseous, lightheaded, cold, and shaky when I'm anxious. My goodness, my heart races when I worry. I feel cold and sometimes weak. I have very little energy. Again, there is no scoring to rate your anxiety. The more symptoms you check off, the more likely, however, that you are experiencing anxiety. Note, some of the above symptoms can also result from various other reasons, and so I would suggest that you consult your primary care physician before making any conclusions, just to rule out anything physical, ailments, or so on that might be affecting you. Okay, so reflecting upon your triggers and identifying beliefs that are standing in your way is something we need to do. So, if you could follow an anxious mind, you might see patterns of unfavorable thoughts that keep playing on and off. These thoughts might be triggers to the anxiety itself, and so addressing them is going to be a very important part of this work. A clinical technique called imagery exposure, used in therapy, can help address the triggers as well as identify their sources. So let's get quiet here, and we're going to do some imagery exposure. Sit with yourself and truthfully reflect on any unfavorable thoughts that play in your mind. The thoughts that stop you from concentrating and being in the present moment. The ones that you want to forget, but you can't, and the ones you might have kept buried and might not necessarily like to share with others. You can also reflect on any worry, thoughts, the ones that haven't happened yet, but that you fear. Recall the sights and sounds of the situation as if it were happening right in front of you, right as we're speaking, in as much detail as you can. Bring in the image of embarrassment, avoidance, worry, fear, hurt, maybe guilt, but bring them in vividly to your mind. Now, I want you to deliberate on that image, living the experience thoroughly, just for the time being. So, really feel it, imagine it. All right, I want the thoughts to stay with you until they decide to leave you at their will. Repeat this exercise once every day for as long as you want. As you progress further, you'll begin to see reasons. You'll realize beliefs that have been blocking your path, your stuck points, so to speak. You're going to find solutions to overcome the negative outcomes of your triggers. And finally, you will find peace. This is the start. Now, this is a gradual process and is the first step to addressing your anxiety. Once you know what's causing your anxiety, you can and will, in time, find ways to manage or overcome it. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in each chapter. Moving beyond the beliefs that are blocking your path, but doing so mindfully. The thing about having stuck points is that when we're caught in one, we don't often think about ways to work around them and move forward. We don't shift into problem solving mode and weigh our options, mostly because we don't know how to and therefore cannot. To be able to solve problems, you must think realistically, coherently, without any chatter. Unfortunately, when we're anxious, our mind can get tied up in its contemplation wheel and fail to work on a more productive and purposeful way. For instance, imagine you have a team deadline to meet, but a member of your team isn't contributing equally. Instead of working yourself up about why he or she isn't doing their bit, it might be more useful to think about ways to help them to step up or to reach the immediate deadline. So here's what you can do. You can speak to the members and let them know where they need to step up while suggesting some options to work these things out. Maybe you could give them simpler jobs or a checklist of what to do every day. Split the work amongst other people on the team. Get the job done first and then look for a more permanent way out. Okay, instead of getting yourself worked up, look at these things that I just suggested. Do this instead. It's more productive. Mindfully forcing yourself to look at the possible solutions as opposed to mulling on the problem can help relieve the stress of rumination. Focusing on a constructive solution will shift you to a more positive state of mind, just as achieving the solution will shift you to a state of peace and contentment. Recognize your challenges. Reflect on the one stuck point that is stopping you from moving forward. Now I want you to define your best 3 realistic solutions. Keep them simple and achievable. Decide what you need to act on. Decide how long you need to gather these tools and start working towards these goals. Where to next? At this point, I think you ought to pat yourself on the back. You've made progress and you are only a step closer to understanding and managing your anxiety. The next few chapters, we will discuss aspects that will go beyond your thoughts. It dwells on areas such as your mind and your body and their role in your anxiety. Take a moment to pause now and then. Stay in the present. This is your reality. Where do you want to be? Okay, let's start preparing for your future. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to meeting with you next week for Chapter 2, Your Mind, Your Body, How to Face Your Inner Demons. Thanks for watching.